языка не были приняты киевским режимом ранее. В течение ведь многих лет после обретения Украины независимости в 1991 году права крымско-татарского народа Киев вообще не беспокоили, несмотря на рекомендации этих же самых международных структур. Украинские власти озаботились проблемами крымских татар только на фоне эффективных действий российских властей по реальному улучшению положения проживающих в Крыму национальностей, развитию их языков и культуры. Поведение Киева и стран Запада, о котором сказано, о котором мы говорили регулярно и сегодня упоминали, свидетельствует о безусловной необходимости выполнения поставленных задач по денацификации и демилитаризации, о чем говорило российское руководство неоднократно. Вот хотелось бы...
The violent and criminal nature of the Ukrainian Western propaganda. It is based on bright yet uncredible, unreliable ideas and materials that are injected in information space. Many claims about alleged war crimes by Russian shellings of civilian infrastructure that trigger the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, and that is not accompanied by photo or video evidence. At the same time, footage from other historical age is accompanying these messages. Rare footage showing the streets of Bucha and Izum and train station in Kramatorsk. This turned out to be fake staging or the efforts by somebody from the Kiev regime. The media hype, and after the media hype, these provocations were forgotten and everything has been put into oblivion. The announced investigation has been stalled because the facts pointed to the Kiev regime as the instigator behind these crimes. By the way, our demands to provide the lists of those casualties in Bucha were left without any response. Given this, Russian media and Russian social networks have a great deal of photo and video footage that confirm many cases of human rights violations, not only during the special military operation, but also over the past 8 years of the conflict in Donbass, and this was done by the Ukrainian neo-nationalists. These materials are abundant. Everybody understands recalls the footage when the armed forces of Ukraine used phosphorus bombs back in 2014. Civilians were maimed by landmines, Lepestok, and the Alley of Angels is a testimony to the atrocities by the armed forces of Ukraine. And children are buried there. They were killed using Western weapons. Since February, Ukrainian shellings in Donbass claimed over 700 civilians, including 39 children. Over 100 civilians were maimed due to Lepestok mines. 12,000 residential houses were injured, were damaged. 2,500 civilian infrastructure facilities were damaged, including medical facilities and 700 power, water, heat, and gas supply facilities. At least 50,000 civilian infrastructure facilities were destroyed. The Russian investigators and investigative authorities carefully record all these cases. The detailed information is reflected in several editions of the White Book by the Investigative Committee and the Russian Foreign Ministry. The data is collected by the International Public Tribunal on Ukraine, which brings together public activists, not only from Russia, but also from other countries. There are 24 of them. These materials are published openly, and these materials are sent to international entities, including the United Nations. For 8 years of the conflict in Donbass, we have called on Western journalists and TV channels to visit the territories to the east of the line of contact. However, the Kiev regime and the Western authorities banned them from doing it so that the public would not see the truth about what is happening. But if we combine this to what Merkel has said, that the Minsk agreements were needed in order to buy some time, then we have a serious and interesting situation. They did not deny access to Western media in the territory of Donbass. At the same time, they had to buy some time to strengthen the Kiev regime. And that's it. That is the real evidence of what was prepared, and that was said by the Russian leadership. This shows that the armed forces of Ukraine and the West are using unacceptable means not only in the military warfare but also in information warfare that they unleashed against Russia. By doing so, the Kiev regime and its Western mentors try to conceal their crimes, and they try to conceal the truth about what is happening in Ukraine. And this shows that it is of utmost importance to implement our goals at hand. When it comes to peaceful initiatives, allegedly peaceful initiatives that are provided by the Kiev regime, let us take a look at what they are doing at the United Nations.
In February, they said that we need to convene a summit on peace. So let's talk about Ukraine and peace as they are. This year, the Black Sea Economic Cooperation celebrated its anniversary. We regret that this anniversary year, it was impossible to adopt a traditional resolution on cooperation because it was blocked by the Kiev regime due to political grounds. That's why the consensus adoption could not happen. And it is especially outrageous that the Ukrainian delegation announced its malicious decisions few minutes before it was declared agreed. And when the document was discussed, the delegation was silent, and all rounds of negotiations, they were silent. It is telling that the destructive position of Kiev was not supported by any country, including members of the EU and Eastern Partnership. This is the true approach of Kiev when they declare that they need to convene a peaceful summit, and then at the same time they block the documents, keep silent at the discussions, and then disrupt the adoption of the document between the Black Sea Economic Cooperation and the UN. This is the reality that we have. We urge Ukraine to stop fomenting confrontation and stop politicizing dialogue on the issues of concern to the whole world, of the economy, the food issues, and we believe that the resolution and cooperation between the IPSEC and the UN will be adopted in the near future. On the 1st of January, the USSR 1942, the USSR, along with other 25 other states, signed the Declaration of the United Nations. This most important document was not only fixed on paper the formation of a broad anti-Hitler coalition, but also laid the foundation for a future multilateral structure designed to unite the countries of the world in their desire for mutually beneficial cooperation. Already in 1945, at the San Francisco Conference, these plans were realized through the creation of the United Nations. Unfortunately, we are now witnessing a consistent departure of a number of states from these unifying ideas. Washington and its allies are still trapped in a Cold War mentality and continue to divide the world into insiders and outsiders, wanting to forcefully impose their will and to invent the axis of evil without any attempts to analyze at the what side of history they were and within what axis they demonstrated themselves while occupying and pumping weapons and shelling bombs in the 20th and the start of the 21st century. So this all speaks to the fact that the motivation of the collective West is a wish to impose their will upon others, and this uncompromising behavior only exacerbates division within the global community and undermines the prospects for the effective multilateral engagement that the world needs more than ever. For its part, Russia intends to continue to firmly defend the lack of alternatives to depoliticized cooperation based on the central coordinating role of the UN and the primacy of the provisions of its charter. Above all, the principles of sovereign equality of states and non-interference in their internal affairs. We call on all members of the international community to return to the spirit of the UN Declaration in order to develop effective responses to many challenges and threats of our time. By the way, in the vein of all this information confrontation, let's see the statements made by Ned Price, spokesperson for the U.S. Department of State. He said that the Russian demands to establish the true clients and perpetrators of the bombing of the Nord Stream now seem to be misinformation. We ask for the investigation and for establishing the truth and for making a conclusion based on facts and to speak about it publicly. Is it misinformation? And we believe that the answer to the question on the time needed can be also regarded as misinformation. If we say that the new year is coming, will be also regarded as such, as misinformation. In this regard, let me repeat the exhaustive description given by the President of the Russian Federation in the course of his communication with journalists on the December 22nd this year. He characterized it as an act of state terrorism. Individuals on their own, without the support of government agencies, are not capable of committing such large-scale terrorist attacks. Clients are interested in supplying Russian gas to the European market only via Ukraine, and the regime in Kiev could receive money for the transit. And as all know, Kiev regime without Washington cannot do anything. It is a united or organized group of people. According to the Russian head of state, it is surprising that there is still no full investigation into the unprecedented attack on international pipelines. I would like to remind you that the ducks that are in the pond or was a pretext for the expulsion of our diplomats. And this is not about ducks, it is about energy security that was undermined physically, not theoretically, but physically. So, while stating that any hint of Washington involvement in the bombing of the gas pipe is absolutely groundless, the U.S. administration silent about the reasons and circumstances of the incident, and this is not surprising. This subject for the White House is uncomfortable, since it was Washington that for years tried to pose democratic but more expensive American liquefied gas for Europe. I'd like to remind once again that in February this year, the highest officials of United States, like the vice president and the president, said that the project would be realized if Russia doesn't cede the conditions of the U.S. So if we are citing the president of the United States, then we are engaged in misinformation. Is it a hint? There is no logic in the allegations heard from the U.S. about Russia's alleged involvement in dismantling of cross-border submarine pipelines that brought us stable profits. But in the atmosphere of Russophobia that is being stirred up in the United States, any nonsense like the one that the Russians did it themselves on purpose in order to annoy Europe is taken for granted and voiced from high tribunes. And where are the facts? Where are the evidence or the elements of the investigations? maybe these facts wouldn't be emanating from concrete state, but there should be some facts. Let me also recall those key issues and questions, the clarification of which will make it possible to establish the truth. Who benefited from playing the Russian card for the geopolitical and energy weakening of Europe? Who was the ultimate beneficiary of destroying pipelines and putting up EU on alternative energy resources? Who was not satisfied with cheap and accessible natural gas from Europe? This is not rhetoric. This is a practical question. And we also know the answer. It is also clear why interested Western countries continue to ignore calls for a transparent, objective, professional, and depoliticized investigation to identify and punish those responsible. Russia will not allow, once again, them to manipulate and to sweep everything under the carpet. Because everything that happened with Nord Stream 1 and 2, this is a crime. This is a terrorist attack that has been prepared ideologically and politically. And when the West exhausted all means of putting pressure on others and their attempts to stop the project, then they started and launched their Plan B. So they just damaged and destroyed the infrastructure. This is not only about the unprecedented attack on the international transport infrastructure, but also extremely dangerous precedent that requires a firm response from the entire international community. We'll continue to seize every opportunity to pursue justice and clarify the background of this grave crime. So, on the December 21st this year, the inauguration of the so-called Russian Hall in the headquarters of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations in Rome took place. Plans to create such a facility appeared several years ago, and this work was carried out with the financial support of the domestic fertilizer producer Prosagra, which has been a traditional partner of the organization for many years. The Russian room is located on the top floor of the headquarters. It is adjoined by a terrace overlooking the historic part of Rome. The room itself is designed in a modern style with elements of Russian folk art. Various Russian minerals used in the production of fertilizers are involved in the design. The relevant photos are available on the website of the permanent mission of the Russian Federation to the FAO and other international organizations in Rome. We will publish all the information in the transcript of our briefing and on the website. The opening ceremony was attended by the General Director of the organization, Sun New, the leadership of the FAO Secretariat, as well as ambassadors and representatives of friendly countries. Russian rooms are open at the UN headquarters in New York and the consultative room and the UN office in Geneva. Let me say a few words about the anniversary. Tomorrow, it will be 35 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations between our country and Nauru. This event was a logical embodiment of the small island state's desire to assert its sovereignty and independence, and on the part of the Soviet Union, continuation of a traditional line to support decolonization and liberalization of peoples of Oceania from the oppression of foreign powers, which repeatedly tried to take Nauruans under the neo-colonialist control. Today, Nauru, along with its neighbors in the sub-region, decided its own destiny without reference to Australia as big brother. We are ready to gradual expansion of friendly bilateral ties with Iran and deepening of interaction in international affairs. We are convinced that stepping up cooperation above all within the framework of Russia developing island state of the South Pacific dialogue mechanism is in the interest of our countries and helps to maintain stability and development in that part of the world. So, as for the compatriots from Latvia, the Ministry of Internal Affairs gave a new edition of the question list for Russian citizens with provocative questions. So the people has to voice their position on the territorial belonging of Crimea. So Latvia is country of a collective West of NATO. Maybe you should expand on the questionnaire, and maybe they should ask whether the candidates for the permanent residency would treat the Falklands and other issues regarding the territorial issues of the sovereignty. They can find different issues relating to the Latvian space. Why do they ask about Crimea? Where is the logic? Because when we proceed from the logic of least trust, that the Baltic and the Black Sea is all the same, then it's possible, but we believe that these seas are different seas, and the Baltic states should guess that. So what Crimea has to do with it? If you're concerned with Crimea, maybe we should add to the list and also give you some questions. And another interesting topic about the position about the demolition of Soviet monuments. There is a requirement to inform about the relatives living in Russia and the aims when visiting other countries. And also, it means that the attitude towards the demolition of the monuments, it has to do with the citizenship and with the permanent stay permits. It is very telling that the questionnaire is standard without ideological grounds and content. It is hard to tell whether it would be a questionnaire used everywhere or it is a selective measure. It is obvious that this measure would mean serious humanitarian consequences for our Russian compatriots, and I will tell you more that it is a step for the future. And this information would be used for the blackmailing of the people. And it is a step for squeezing out the politically biased people and dividing people into citizens and non-citizens. So Latvia surpassed all of the red lines regarding the national minorities, Russian-speaking people. They turned a blind eye on the national obligations in the human rights sphere, but also neglect them in an outrageous way. We condemn such actions, and because they are violations of the human rights norms, the equality of people before the law. And the situation is exacerbated by the fact that international structures do not react and anyhow respond to such illegal practices that are in place in some countries of the EU. And such double standards of the West just undermine the human rights defendant system, which has been nurtured by it, and this gives an aversion for the part of all other countries. And we can say that it is for the better that something that hasn't been used should be destroyed. Yes and no, because human rights in their initial understanding, initial definition, the near the colonialism and different norms of the legislature in some countries, all this, the human rights and the norms we have developed due to horrendous errors of the history, like gas cameras and gas cells during the Nazi regime. That's why now we've introduced this notion of human rights. Only due to its politicized nature, only due to the fact that it was associated with the moral values of the West, all this system is being destructed in such a horrible way, and the human rights would be discredited. This is not possible. It should not be accepted.
Given this, we would like to highlight that Russia abides by all its commitments in human rights law. We remain open for dialogue, for win-win cooperation. When it comes to the staying of foreigners in our territory, they are not subjected to this loyalty test. Let me share the information with you provided by our colleagues. The Russian Federation is strengthening humanitarian cooperation when it comes to public health and well-being, preventing and fighting infections with dozens of countries of the Eurasian region, Africa, Latin America, Central and Southeast Asia. We provide material and technical, scientific and practical assistance in preventing and responding to the epidemics. We train personnel of partner countries, and we develop and implement programs of joint R&D. Our country is the leader when it comes to combating global biological threats. In this year alone, we hosted 7 international exercises of rapid response teams that brought together over 500 persons in Armenia, Belarus, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. We told you about that. Large-scale exercises with the use of mobile labs took place this November in the city of Mineral near Vody. Against the backdrop of the pandemic, we continued providing assistance to our foreign countries, including in the Eurasian Economic Union and the CIS. In 2022, we provided test kits for 1 million tests against COVID-19 and monkeypox. We trained specialists from ASEAN. In March, in May, and in November, the courses saw the training of at least 100 experts from ASEAN countries. We continued joint scientific research in the centers of Guinea and Vietnam. We also expanded our presence in Africa and Latin America. We purchased and supplied lab equipment to these countries. In 2023, we start joint research and training of personnel. We continue active work with our colleagues when it comes to combating the COVID-19. Let me remind you that Sputnik V vaccine was the first ever COVID vaccine, and our vaccine was recognized and adopted in more than 70 countries of the world. We continue to work to uproot this pandemic. We had the conferences on the study of COVID-19, antibiotic resistance, and it brought together over 200 people from dozens of countries in the world, including the Eurasian Economic Union, the CIS, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Russian experience of ensuring public health and well-being in 2022 was indeed praised by the relevant international organizations. The Central Scientific and Research Institute of Epidemiology received the status of reference center of the Food and Agricultural Organization on antimicrobial resistance. And another topic on our agenda, we'd like to share our achievements and initiatives that are prepared by our colleagues in the Russian government. The international project, Games of the Future. It is a new format of sporting competition aimed at supporting the movement to develop innovative sporting kinds that is a mix of cybersport and classical types of sport. This initiative is a unique, unparalleled project that combines modern computer technologies and traditional sporting mastery. Such approach opens up significant opportunities to engage broad audience, primarily the youth, into going in for sports via the new forms. We believe that this initiative paves the way for new prospects in the development of international sporting cooperation. Our country has already invested a great deal of effort to prepare for this project. In 2022, Kazan hosted 3 test events: the International Games, Digital Life, and 3 other games are slated for the next year. The first global international tournament on combined disciplines that demands that athletes should have the skills in virtual reality and physical training, and we intend to host it in Kazan in March 2024. Later on, we plan to host such multi-sport competitions with big prize money every 2 years in various countries of the world. For our part, we're open for interaction with our international partners in this project. We look forward to the broad participation of foreign athletes in digital games and the games of the future. With that, I'm ready to take your questions. Do have International Life with us. Good day, Happy New Year, Madam Zakharova. You have already touched upon this topic. Nevertheless, I have my question. Advisor to Zelensky office, Alexei Arestovich, lately suggested that Ukraine could be deprived of the US support after 2024. What are the real prospects of weakening support to Ukraine by the US and the West? To be honest, I don't believe that it is necessary to comment on the statements, because what is behind that? Is it pure propaganda or just his own viewpoint? Is hard to say. There are no real facts. And in this case, and it is all built in the general context of propaganda efforts, and I believe that many of these statements are not worthy of our attention. Okay, thank you. My second question. What's your take on the use of civil commercial satellites by the US and its NATO allies to support Ukraine? We actively use the opportunities of the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space to draw the attention of the international community to a new trend amid the special military operation. What you have mentioned is that the US, and not only them but also NATO allies, use civil commercial satellites and the relevant land infrastructure to support the armed forces of Ukraine. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty provides for the use of outer space solely for peaceful purposes. Amid the real armed conflict in Ukraine, Washington tests the innovative system of managing troops, building upon quasi-state, quasi-civilian space technologies. And the majority of states simply cannot oppose this trend. At risk are the paramount social and economic processes, and clearly developing countries, including BRICS partners, are seriously concerned about the developments. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Let's move on. RT, are you here with us? As always. Good day, Madam Zakharova. I have 2 questions, if I may. The first one has to do with the interview given by Andrew Milburn. This is the retired Marine Corps colonel. He established Mozart Company, military company. It actively supports armed forces in Ukraine. He said that Ukraine is a corrupted state that is out of its mind. The servicemen of Ukraine do not have humanity. it means that people are reading our briefings, reading the website of the MFA, and at the same time they have many other alternative sources and they draw their own conclusions. Each and every one has their own viewpoint, but it's important to build your viewpoint on some facts. I wouldn't like to focus on a person who made this statement. I would like to say some words on the crux of the matter. These problems that were enlisted, they were highlighted repeatedly, including by the international organizations. When it comes to corruption in Ukraine, the White House, the very White House, spoke about that. It tried to bring the Kiev regime to reality by one way or another. Currently, they're harping on the audit issue, audit by the US of what they supplied to Ukraine, because they understand full well that this was robbed together with American officials and individually, and it has happened for all these years. You can recall how many times we talked about that. These tranches of assistance before 2022 were sent to Ukraine to support it, but these funds returned to Western banks. There were sectors that could have obvious progress given the paramount amount of money, but there was no progress whatsoever. As for a state that has gone mad, let me start with the word state, because a state should have some features, for instance, sovereignty, independence, some kind of a domestic structure in line with the laws and norms. What do you see here? We see that every year, everything that was written in the previous year was rewritten and reinterpreted. The real trends and the real facts that a country lived by, starting with the language, ethnic and cultural groups, was it reflected in the political structure? Were the interests of these people delegated via the elected bodies? Did the executive power in Ukraine happen? And was it to the benefit of the Ukrainian people? Not at all. So you shouldn't start with describing it as a good or bad state, a right or wrong state, whether it is a mad state or not. But we should ask a question whether it is a state at all. And the attack on its statehood was made not from without, but from within. Because changing power, changing authorities to the liking of the West, if you seize administrative bodies by force, then you can't even dream about any kind of statehood in the years to come. No matter what they say, they would say that they will start rebuilding, reviving. But that is a cheap trick that is told to their own civilians, to their own population. For 30 years, they had this opportunity to rebuild themselves. And for 30 years, we have witnessed the following. Some political activists, but actually anti-Ukrainian saboteurs of the West, they were destroying their own country. So when it comes to humanity and humanistic values, what kind of values can we talk about? People were trained for decades at military bases, and these were not legal official military bases. These were camps in the Baltic states and in Poland, and these atrocities were shown by the people not now, not in the 2022 against occupants, as they put it, and not for the past 8 years against the civilians in Donbass that they considered as alien in their country, but they shown their violence with regard to their own population and compatriots that fully fit their description of decent people. In 2014, it happened in Maidan, and this was in Kiev, not Donbass, not Donetsk, but Kiev, whom they attacked with Molotov cocktails. Who were they beating? Who they were tried to block as they buried the gears? It was their own population, not the people that they consider as alien, as foes. Not at all. These were the citizens of Kiev. You can take a look at the different footage right now, but you could remember what it all started with, 2013, 2014, what happened in Kiev. And if somebody tries to claim that this was a peaceful rally, I can say that it cannot be compared to any peaceful rally whatsoever in any country of the world. It was fully orchestrated. So you need to get to the crux of the matter that we have mentioned. Well, the thing is that it's not a revelation for the Western world, but for some reason they continue supplying Kiev with aid. Who exactly? The Western world. But they were building this new Ukrainian state. That's what they wanted to cobble together. They didn't wish to build a new democratic strong state. They tried to use this demise of Ukraine in order to use it as a weaponry against our country. If they wanted to make Ukraine strong, they had all the opportunities to this end. And nobody stood against that. Russia would continue pumping its resources via Ukraine. It would receive its revenue. The Russian-speaking population would remain the citizens of Ukraine, and it would enjoy the right to speak their language, communicate with family, with friends. There would be trade. There would be Western investment to develop Ukraine. There would be no problems and nobody would stand against this model. For 30 years, nobody raised an issue of Crimea. Let me remind you that there was a treaty on the Black Sea Fleet, and we paid for that, and we paid for everything that we promised to Kiev in good faith. And we did it timely. That is why the West didn't want to have any well-being in Ukraine. The well-being in Ukraine is stability in the region, and who wishes to have stability in the region, in the West? If they wanted, if they were ready to claim for many years that Europe should abandon Russian energy sources, and if they do not abandon themselves, then they would destroy this project. And that was made, these statements were made by the US. Inside the Western world, they are not interested in stability. So what kind of stability can we talk about in the space that is alien to them historically? Thank you. And my second question is about a statement of Said Yusuf, who is the deputy head of the Turkish Office for the Affairs of the Turks Abroad. He made a statement on Crimea. He said that the next meeting will take place in Bakhchisarai, that is the land of the Crimean Tatars and so on. I know that on the 22nd to the 25th of December, the Anatolia University of the city of Eskişehir hosted a conference on the Crimean Tatar issue. And during this conference, traditional anti-Russian statements were made by the Majlis of Crimean Tatar people, that is recognized as extremist entity, and that it comes as no surprise. We regret that deputy head of the State Office on the Affairs of Turks Abroad, Said Yusuf, followed the lead of instigators from Majlis, and he expressed his hope to host the next meeting in Bakhchisarai, as you have rightly mentioned. We believe that this statement of an official representative of the Turkish Republic As inappropriate and malevolent, it is aimed against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Russia. We believe it is unacceptable to play with extremist organizations like Mejlis. They openly practice anti-Russian activities. Once again, let me reiterate that this rhetoric is damaging Russian and Turkish relations. It contradicts the course of our leaders to comprehensively develop win-win cooperation between Russia and Turkey. And to our friends, those who sincerely desire to learn the truth about what is happening in Russian Crimea, we're always welcoming you to Bakhchisaray. We also welcome our Turkish friends there. If Mr. Yusuf wants to visit Bakhchisaray, he should talk not to extremist entities, but to the state entities of the Russian Federation. They would be happy to brief him on how he can visit Crimea. He could talk to citizens there, and he wouldn't be built on the information provided by extremists. It's best to meet the real representatives of the Crimean Tatar people, and not abroad, but in their homeland, in Crimea. If you have no further questions, let's move on. Do we have Izvestia with us? Yes, Madam Zakharova. Is there a format as the Munich conference that exists to Russia? Do you see the interest of Russia in the participation of this event? Do you see any prospect in this platform for the communication with foreign partners? We replied to this question a month ago. We haven't changed our stance. Once it was a well-respected conference, now it is just a buffoonery, anti-Russian buffoonery. Under the pretext of building a dialogue with Russian society, it invites outcasts nurtured by Western NGOs, and after that it invites it as an independent expert. So what kind of constructive dialogue can we talk about? As for the level of expertise, it is also appropriate. In February, for instance, in February 2020, I visited the Munich conference, and I was listening to the broadcasting of the Munich conference for several weeks or even for several months. It was clear that the world is facing a new situation called COVID-19 pandemic, and it was surprising to hear the representatives of the West, of Western countries. They were accusing Russia and other countries of some scenes. They were inventing stories. At the same time, there was breaking news that in France there were first cases of COVID-19 recorded, and so on and so forth. Italy was in the red zone due to the pandemic, and so on and so forth. So there was a difference between what is happening on the ground and what they were discussing. And it was so obvious that it was not possible to neglect that. If they genuinely were experts in security policy, they had to discuss biosecurity, cooperation, coordination of efforts, logistics, joining hands in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19, assisting citizens, emergency situation, and so on and so forth. But they haven't uttered a single word on that. And in a month's time, it all had a blast in the whole world. So that shows you the level of expertise. And for 2 years, the world was involved in this pandemic for 2 years. And a week before that, the brightest minds of this North Atlantic structure could not envisage what was obvious to the rank-and-file citizens. So we believe that only those platforms that could outline the viewpoints of everyone hold a prospect that could have an objective reply to what is happening. In the current format, the Munich conference is just a follow-up to the Western mainstream to demonize a number of countries. How can it help resolve the current crisis? It's not clear at all. So if it is a club of Western interests that have the only desire to condemn Russia and China, let them do that. If the organizers manage to abandon this addiction and if they show their commitment to discussing global security architecture, in this case, probably one might think how it is possible to take a different view of this entity. But once again, it should be done once they abide by the demands and requirements that I have mentioned. So far, it is nowhere to be seen.
На эту тему
I'd like to draw your attention that this was a topic discussed by our Minister Lavrov during his interview in Большая игра, Big Game. So we are going further. Raters, a good day, Maria Vladimirovna. We have a question regarding an interview of Sergei Lavrov to the TASS agency. In the above interview, the Russian foreign minister said that Russia would not cooperate with Russophobes, but continue, and I quote, to work with those few Europeans who value friendship with Russia. I would like to ask what Europeans he referred to in his interview, who in the EU, according to the foreign ministry, values friendship with Russia. First, the list of the unfriendly states has been published, and the second thing, that there are constructive structures and organizations that continue doing business in the interest of peoples and states and nations in the face of their obligations, energy, political obligations. They do not pose any conditions, and they do not participate in anti-Russian projects. This is an answer to your question. But in the interview, Sergei Lavrov gave all the necessary explanations. And we can say that with those who are open to equal relations, we are of course ready to exchange, to engage in a dialogue. We hope that the EU countries will eventually have more leaders capable of thinking positively, focused on creation rather than destruction, and ready to act together with our state for the good of the European continent, that would be ready to lead a dialogue in spite of the discrepancies. And when you have no differences that would sound like a choir of singers, and when we have some differences and discrepancies, this is a dialogue and a discussion, and we would always be open for that. But to hold a dialogue with those who act destructively regarding our country, we have no intention to. Thank you. And I would like to ask another question. Maybe you have information regarding Russian plans on introducing limitations for the foreigners from China coming to Russia. No, I do not have such information. The portal news.ru. Are you with us? Yes. Good day. I would like to wish the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and your department Happy New Year. We wish you prosperity, good meetings, and all the best, and peace also. I have 3 questions. The first one, Tiraspol claims that Chisinau is disrupted the transnational settlement negotiations by discussing the draft law on counter-separatism. Will Moscow raise the issue and take an action through like a participant in the 5+2 negotiation format? We really paid attention to the draft law and amendments to the Moldovan Criminal Code adopted by the Parliament of the Republic of Moldova. In their draft, they introduced the legal circulation, particular such concepts as separatism and an anti-constitutional entity. We believe that it would be justified if the Transnistrian conflict were finally resolved. And it is precisely why this bill has provoked such a strong reaction in Transnistria, and it is no coincidence that the Supreme Council of the region appealed to the Moldovan deputies to refuse it further promotion. We know that the aforementioned amendments dilute the basic principles of the negotiation process for the Transnistria settlement. We are convinced that the introduction of such additions to the Moldovan Criminal Code will not add to mutual understanding between Chisinau and Tiraspol against the background of the cooling of the dialogue between the banks of the Dniester and the pause of the work of 2+5 format. We expect the Moldovan side will once again weigh the added value of this step in the context of the Transnistria settlement. The second question. The Secretary of the Security Council of Armenia, Armen Grigoryan, said that it is now possible for Russia to stand alongside Armenia, protect its sovereignty. The Yerevan expects Russia to act accordingly. In its disagreement with Azerbaijan, Armenia often expects help from Moscow as its ally. Does Moscow focus on allied relations with Yerevan in the Armenian-Azerbaijani settlement? I would like to speculate on the words of the political figure that you've mentioned. As for our relations, we are basing on statements of November 2020, of January 11th, 2021, October 31st, 2022, and they give a basis for the solid relations between our states. And we've always been an intermediary between Armenia and Azerbaijan, a mediator who has always taken a position which allows us to perform such function. As the CSTO, in case of Yerevan, is interested, all other member countries of the organization would be ready to send a monitoring mission to Armenia. And the last question. Çavuşoğlu announced the plans to have negotiations with his Russian colleague, Sergei Lavrov. Are you expecting any meeting between them? As for the details, I do not have them about any forthcoming event, but with Turkey we have constant dialogue between the ministers of foreign affairs, and we constructively assess this initiative from the Armenians, from the Turkish side. CGTN, the China Media Corporation, are you with us? Yes. Vladimir Putin signed a decree on countermeasures to the introduction of a price ceiling on Russian oil. According to it, starting from February the 1st next year, the supply of petroleum products to buyers will comply with the ceiling of prices, will be prohibited. At the same time, the decree provides for a possible exception based on special decision of the president. For what reasons did the Kremlin make such a decision, and will Moscow take similar measures? We have already repeatedly said that the introduction of the so-called price ceiling on Russian oil is anti-market measure, which will disrupt the supply chains and will significantly complicate the situation on the global energy markets. We are sure that such price dictate and formation of a buyer's cartel creates an extremely dangerous precedent for international trade. It is no coincidence that many countries do not support this provocative venture, knowing well that today it is aimed against Russia and tomorrow it can be applied to any other country on other goods for political or other reasons. According to the presidential decree, as for February 1st, supplies of Russian oil and petroleum products to foreign legal entities and individuals are prohibited, provided that the contracts for these supplies directly or indirectly provide for the use of price fixing mechanism. The current price level, the set ceiling, is simply absurd. However, in the long run, it could create serious problems and increase uncertainty and volatility in the oil market. As regards practical measures, I'd like to draw attention to paragraph 7 of the decree, according to which the right to give official explanation on the application of this decree is granted to the Minister of Energy of the Russian Federation in coordination with the Minister of Finance of our country. We believe it is important to emphasize that Russia remains one of the largest energy suppliers to the world markets and will continue to cooperate with countries interested in equal, mutually beneficial cooperation in the energy sector. So we are moving on. The Moscow Post. Yes, good day. We have several questions. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov recently met with Russian media leaders, gave an interview to TASS, before which he spoke at a meeting with the permanent members of the Security Council on the concept of the Russian foreign policy and answered questions on the program Moscow, Kremlin, Putin. What do you think, based on these pitches of the minister, what new things can be expected in Russian foreign policy in 2023? What will be abandoned? We have already said that we will publish this day the materials regarding the outcome of the outgoing year prepared by experts. So I've already answered one of your questions. The only thing I can say that Russia's foreign policy dictated by its national interest. The strategic goals and priorities of the foreign policy remain the same. They are to ensure the country's security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, creating favorable external conditions for internal development, preserving and improving the well-being of the Russian people, and consolidating the position of our country as one of the centers of development of the modern world. As for the methods and principles of implementing our foreign policy priorities, their thinking began quite a long time ago when it became clear that the world was irreversibly moving towards multipolarity. Our special military operation only accelerated many of the processes that had begun before and exacerbated to the limit the contradictions that existed. We have a de facto not just judging by the words, but de facto discrepancies with the West, talking as if nothing has happened, with those who are doing everything possible to inflict a strategic defeats on Russia is ruled out. That has been stated by Russian leaders. We are also limiting our activity and participation in Western-centric institutions. At the same time, we are busy saturating the fabric of cooperation with the rest of the world, forming a network of interaction mechanisms, independent of whims of the United States and the European Union, and aimed at supporting a just, equitable, and policy-centric world order based on international law. We have many actors to work with. In the Global East and in the South, we have our main partners and like-minded people. And the things that we need to be cautious that will not be supported or will be let down. This is absurd. And in the future, of course, everything can happen. And in the past, it was the West which betrayed us, and we had two patriotic wars that were not initiated by Russia. It was France and Germany. And after the end of the Cold War, Russia wanted to create and to build a new world based on international law with a coordinating role of the UN aimed at equitable interaction. And now we see that the collective West has betrayed all these ideals. We would be in line with the equitable and polycentric world based on international law. Second question. There was a meeting of the Collegium of the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Russian Minister of Economic Development on the subject of improving the coordination of foreign economic activity. How is the work planned to be structured in the future? Which agency will be main coordinator? And what does political and diplomatic support of foreign projects mean? This format of support of foreign projects, this is a traditional format which are undertaken by the Russian missions in other countries, which defend the legal interests of our country in from abroad. And the statement of the Collegium was also published on the internet. What is Russia's attitude to Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan's accusations that Russian peacekeepers are not fulfilling their obligation in Nagorno-Karabakh? During a joint press conference on the December 23rd with their Azerbaijani counterparts, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov commented in detail on this topic, and we think that we do not have anything to add. So, as the CIS leaders, what their meeting gave for the settlement. Regarding the functions that we have, these comments are given by the administration of the president. So let's follow the format that has been already established. The Anadolu news agency. Are you with us? Yes. Good day, Maria Vladimirovna. And we wish you Happy New Year, and also would like to wish you happy birthday that you have celebrated in a week during this week. If it's okay, yes, it's okay. We wish you all the best, all success in the future. We value you and respect you, love you very much. This is our mutual feeling. So, first question. The Ukrainian Foreign Minister Kuleba stated that Kiev intends to hold a peace summit at the UN in February. He also stated that Moscow's actions in the front line contradict its call for peace. How would you comment on this statement? As for the strange and odd initiative about the peace summit, I've commented in detail. And as for the statement that Moscow's actions in the front lines contradict its call for peace, who would say that? Because, you know, Zelensky signed a decree or something like that, and he stated at a national level the impossibility of leading talks with the Russian Federation. So there is nothing to discuss. What is the difference for them? In this very case, if they prohibited to lead negotiations, they shouldn't think and do anything for us. Thank you very much. And second question, this also relates to Ukraine. On Monday, Ukraine issued an official statement announcing the initiative to strip Russia of its permanent UN Security Council status. And They also claim that Russian Federation has never undergone the legal procedure for membership and therefore legally occupies the seat of the Soviet Union on the UN Security Council. How would you comment on that? So who said that? It is the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. So it believes that Russia has not undergone any procedures of the UN. Would be inadequate to comment on that because this logic is distorted.
которые
Following this logic, one can presume that all the decisions made by Security Council from the very point when the Soviet Union collapsed and Russia replaced it, from the viewpoint of the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, these decisions should be illegitimate. Since our presence there is illegitimate, all the decisions since then, maybe they would even say that there was no collapse of the Soviet Union. It would be interesting to hear about that, as if you see and as if you read some fictional stories. It has nothing to do with the law, with the rule of law and international law. Do we have Vevelk? Yes. Happy New Year to you, Madam Zakharova. I have a few questions. The first one would be lengthy. For 8 days, Lachin corridor is blocked, and given that Russia cannot independently make Azerbaijan abide by the trilateral statement of November the 9th, 2020. We have a question regarding cooperation within the OSCE Minsk group. Since Russia, the US, and France have pretty much the same position on the blocking of the Lachin corridor and unblocking the situation with Artsakh. The second question, given the humanitarian crisis and the blocking of the road, can Stepanakert airport could be used for supplying some humanitarian cargo because the deficit is dire? As for the use of the airport, it's not within the purview of the foreign ministry. As for the Minsk group, you ask whether it could be used. Let me remind you that it was blocked. And who blocked the work of this group? It was not blocked by Russia. We were not the ones who block it. And as for the current state of this group, it was clearly articulated by the foreign ministry and by the foreign minister of Russia. I can add nothing to that. As for the criticism against Russia and the Russian troops, I believe that that is not acceptable. We have repeatedly stated that the Russian peacekeepers are doing their utmost to resolve the situation on the ground. No public attacks do not contribute to the situation. The situation was even worse in the past, and we do our utmost to make it better. A couple of hours ago, Prime Minister of Armenia said that if Russia objectively or subjectively is not able to ensure stability in Nagorno-Karabakh, he wants to initiate the discussion at the United Nations Security Council to have a mandate for peacekeepers or to send additional peacekeepers to the region. And as a follow-up, he said that although Armenia stands for peacekeepers, but it is unacceptable for us to see this behavior of the Russian peacekeepers who bear witness to the ethnic cleansing in the Nagorno-Karabakh. How would you comment on that? Can I also have a question? Could somebody say responsibly, and responsibly, by responsibly I mean not immediately, but assuming responsibility, would it be better if there was no Russian peacekeepers? I believe that the answer is obvious. So you can say, and you can talk about raising efficiency as much as you can, but once again, the situation is something that we deal with. But saying these things is simply showing that they do not understand the realities on the ground. Today, you commented on Armen Grigoryan. It was not said by me, it was a question addressed to me. Okay, that was a question. So, in this interview, he said that Armenia is forced to provide a corridor via its sovereign territory, that it is a sovereign state, and this topic is hyped on massively in Armenia. Is there an item on Russia-Armenia agenda regarding Armenia joining the Union state and regarding this corridor via the sovereign territory of Armenia? I have another question. People who say that they are forced to do something, what facts corroborate their opinion? And what kind of coercion was that? Was it made in a friendly environment with red wine involved, or was it made by force, harshly? We should understand how it all happened, or maybe a person just said that, I know that there was a coercion. I do not recall how it all happened, but I do know that there was a coercion. But some facts should be corroborating it. If people make such statements without any facts and they specifically mention a country, not just a trend, but they make certain claims to a certain country, then please corroborate your statement with facts. Because allegedly they make reference to this fact, but show them to us, tell us about that, because in this case we could say something in addition to what Peskov said. He said that none of the Russian officials said any of this kind about the need for Armenia to join the Union state, and all the assessments have already been made. But once again, you need to provide at least something to corroborate your stance. And the same goes to the statement that allegedly Russia involves and forces Armenia to make this corridor via its sovereign territory. In accordance with the statement of the 11th of January this year within the trilateral working group on unblocking all the economic and transport ties in the region, various ways of opening communications are discussed, including issues that have to do with the resumption of railroad in southern Armenia. One of the principles that are not challenged by Baku or Yerevan is that the sovereignty over the routes is enjoyed by the country, by the party, where these corridors are located. Thank you. And the last question. Lately, there was a meeting between Azerbaijan and Turkey, and then the defense minister of Turkey said that by 2025, the Azerbaijani troops should be in line with the requirements of Turkey. There will be a common organism that would implement common tasks. What's Moscow's take on this close integration between Azerbaijan and one of the leading NATO countries, and all the claims of Russia towards NATO expansion on the post-Soviet state have nothing to do with Turkey? We have already stated that all the countries can have this right to develop military and technical cooperation with other states. At the same time, we tell constantly to the countries of the region that this kind of interaction should not oppose any third countries, and they should not have an impact on the balance in the Southern Caucasus. Thank you and Happy New Year. Al Mayadin, are you here with us? Al Mayadin Agency. Since Al Mayadin is not with us, Kurdistan 24. I can see that you're here with us. Can you hear me? Good day. Kurdistan 24 News Agency. As you might know, on the 23rd of December in Paris, a terrorist attacked a Kurdish cultural center, killing 3 Kurdish activists. So I have the following question. What is the position of Russia with regards to the killings of Kurds in Paris? As you have rightly said, in the evening on the 25th of December, 3 Kurds were killed in Paris near the cultural Kurdish center. According to the prosecutor of Paris, a criminal case was initiated on charges of murder or attempted murder due to racial, ethnic, or national religious grounds and illegal possession of weapons. The French officials state that at this stage they don't have any grounds to believe that that is a terrorist attack. According to French media, the attacker already committed crimes previously against migrants, and he explained that he is a racist and he has this hatred towards foreigners. There are all the grounds to believe that he had some psychological problems, and this should be confirmed by the experts. They have already been identified. According to the investigation, the goal of this attack and the target of this attack was not the Kurds, but foreigners at large. As for the events in Paris in January 2013, that claimed the lives of 3 members of the Working Party of Kurdistan, in this case, you shouldn't make any parallels and draw any parallels. At the same time, the investigation should give an answer to this question and the court. And second of all, I would like to draw your attention to the general rise of xenophobia, hate to non-ethnic French and migrants in France. Lately has been ratcheted up actions of neo-Nazi groups and far-right forces. The French authorities should have cared about growing radicalization and growing xenophobic and racist moods. By the way, you could also note the anti-Russian sentiment behind the statements that we hear from France from a number of officials. Alas, they openly urge to make anti-Russian steps and so on and so forth. And this also showcases this xenophobia and hatred. Sometimes they cover behind the words cancel culture, but the mechanism is the same. Zero tolerance towards somebody who is not like you, who is different to you. Thank you. Let's move on. RTVI, are you here with us? Hello, Madam Zakharova. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Do you expect an aspiration to a dialogue from the new US ambassador that was recently appointed to this office? We have commented on this topic more than once. During our briefing on the 15th of December, I said that a person who wishes to work in Russia, and it also has to do with all other countries, maybe somebody has its own viewpoint, but we have traditional views on the work of ambassadors. Indeed, they need to show their commitment to the constructive professional work to avoid worsening of dialogue with the US and our country. That would be irreparable and irreversible. That's what we are guided by. Not that it should be just a part of functions of a new ambassador, but it should be the main part of her functions, to show herself, to show her desire and her ability and opportunities to work constructively to rectify the situation. Let me draw your attention to the interview of the director for Northern American Department of the Russian Foreign Ministry. It was published at the MFA website on the 23rd of December. He said that, in our view, it is important for the ambassador not to be guided by worsening of relations that are already in tatters, but she should try to preserve them at the current level and to make them better. We'll still have to talk and to agree on some things, but to this end, you need to abandon messianism and mentor habits that are not appropriate against the current backdrop, and that is the genuine diplomacy that should be built on respect to the history, culture, and values of the host country. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have Radio Saga with us? Yes. Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas to you and to all of your team. Russian president claimed that he is confident that certain circles in Poland want to grab Western territories of modern Ukraine. And I quote, in Poland, nationalist elements want to grab its historical lands that Ukraine received after World War II. And this was said by Vladimir Putin during his meeting with members of the Human Rights Council on the 7th of December 2022. We should also mention a bill by the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, number 7550 of the 28th of July 2022 on special legal status in Ukraine. The Polish citizens in Ukraine shall enjoy special status. What's your assessment of possible processes of alienation of Western lands of Ukraine by Poland? And what is the interest of the main investor of the Ukrainian project? You make reference to the statement of the Russian president of the 7th of December, but on the 15th of December, during our briefing, we commented on this topic in detail. We provided facts, quotes, data. I cannot repeat all of it because it was quite a lengthy material. I just want to say that a number of public and political activists and circles in Poland are indeed pursuing this policy. But with regard to official statements, a lot is made behind the scenes, and it is all made in a benevolent way, but we see things that speak to the opposite. So please take a look at the material. We would provide you the link during the current script of the current briefing. Thank you. Pakistani TV channel 92 News AG Plus. Are you here with us?
92 News Pakistan, Happy New Year in advance. I have three questions. My first question is, the year 2023 is very important for democracy in Pakistan because general elections are going to be held in the country this year. A new government will come to power as a result of the democratic process. Does Russia hope that the new government will start Pakistan-Russia relations on a new level?
Как вы знаете,
As you know, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan is an important foreign political partner of Russia. Relations with Pakistan are of independent value. They are not subject to fluctuations in foreign political situation. We are convinced that the positive momentum of our interaction will be preserved with any government because it is underpinned by the care about the prosperity of our peoples.
After the US and the UK, Saudi Arabia and Australia have also advised their citizens to exercise precaution and restrict their movement due to a possibility of a terrorist attack in Islamabad. A suicide attack was failed in Islamabad a few days ago. On the other hand, the Afghan Taliban has started providing logistic support to the outlawed Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. In what context does Russia see this situation?
На прошлой неделе
Last week, we strongly denounced and condemned the orchestrators of a terrorist attack in Islamabad on the 23rd of December. Russia stands in solidarity with Pakistan against the global threat. Amid the growing terrorist activities in a number of provinces of this country, we reaffirm our commitment to strengthening constructive cooperation with the Islamic Republic of Pakistan on counterterrorism, both in multilateral formats, primarily the United Nations and the SCO, and bilaterally.
As you know, 92 News UK and 92 News Pakistan has been covering Russia extensively, bringing every aspect of Russian army operation in Ukraine and Russian culture to its viewers in the best possible way. Recently, 92 News UK has celebrated its anniversary. We would be happy if you say some words for this channel. Well,
We welcome the aspiration of your TV channel to objectively brief your audience in Pakistan and abroad about the developments in Russia, building on credible information and facts. Using direct contact, you ask your questions and we are answering live. Indeed, as you might know, we highlight the need for everyone to be guided by objective media coverage and to be guided not by politically motivated approach, but to be professional. Unfortunately, we see that many, including many in the West, claim to be unbiased, but basically they are conducting an aggressive information war. They cover up with journalist accreditation and the lofty status of journalism. I do hope that we will continue cooperating with your TV channel, with its representatives, and we will continue this genuine interaction that should happen between journalists and officials, building upon respect, professional approach, objectivity, facts, and fact-checking.
Вам.
Thank you. Have we answered all the questions? Almayadin, I can hear you, Almayadin. Madam Zakhara, thanks a lot. It's a pity that I don't have a video connection, just audio. Nevertheless, I can see you. First of all, let me wish you a Happy New Year and Merry Christmas. And my wishes extend to you and your colleagues. During this challenging year, we have done a great job, good job. And we covered this conflict as we could, guiding by our conscience. So I have a following question. If we take stock of the year, do you believe that we have managed to undermine this information blockade of Russia by the collective West? Have you managed to expose this fake campaign against? By way of answering your question regarding whether we have managed to undermine this information blockade by the West, I can say that the West has been undermined due to its propaganda, and that's for sure. The number of mines of explosive devices in information terms that were put by Western mainstream have played a cruel trick on it. They just became hostages of their own lies and deception. They started using their power, and they're quite powerful, on spreading the fake news, and this has failed. It showed to the whole world this atrocious lies by the West.
So they started to discredit themselves, talking about their unwillingness to comply with the Minsk agreements. And they also said that they strengthened Ukraine, pumping in weapons. They discredit themselves when they use the topics of atrocities in Mariupol, in Bucha. And it's obvious to the whole world that these scenarios were staged, and there are plenty of examples regarding this. If that's all, then I would like to thank you. Thank you for our cooperation this year. I've already wished you Happy New Year at the beginning of the briefing. I'd like once again to wish you forces, patience in defending the truth, and your longing for light. So peace, well-being, and all the best.